All right. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, we have a good one for folks. I mean, a good one.
Yeah. Well, I feel that
This
way every week, Shauna.
I know. Well, I just, the overwhelm of this podcast, knowing that there's more than what we can talk about going on. But as y'all know, over the years, we kind of filtered down into two phases because we could go into more depth for
Mm-hmm.
y'all. It's always that conundrum. It's like, oh, we could cover like 10 things, but we'll stick with two good ones.
Yeah.
But this week, we've got a really cool word that I had not heard before. So let's dive into word of the week.
Okay, so I've been listening to a lot of political commentators over the last several months, and I've noticed the term jawboning has been used a lot in reference to members of the Trump administration talking about various policies or actions and not being truthful about it. So I was curious because I thought it was just talking shit, right? You're just like chatting and saying whatever you think, but it actually has a more specific meaning. So I looked it up, and it is so I've got a couple of definitions here. It is the attempt to persuade or pressure by the force of one's position or authority. So it's using your position of authority in a manipulating way. So another example was the use of public appeals as by a president to influence the actions, especially of business and labor leaders. And then another one so there's an organization called FIRE, which does legal challenges around free speech. They have sometimes been on the side of good and sometimes been on the side of bad, I have found, but they had some information about this because jawboning is essentially a way to limit speech. And they quote this person who I've never heard of from the Cato Institute, and the Cato Institute is an independent libertarian think tank. And this person says jawboning is the use of official speech to inappropriately compel private action. In other words, it's the government using power or the threat of it to indirectly bully individuals, institutions, or organizations into doing their bidding when it can't flat out force them. So when you hear journalists or commentators use jawboning, it isn't just talking shit, right? It is perpetuating a lie or a level of persuasion to make people do something with the force of their authority. So, what do you think about that, Shauna?
Well, this is interesting to me because when Lily Zhang wrote their book, there was a chapter in there that talked about six different forms of power. And of course, coercive power is one in particular. That, yes, power dynamics are going on around us all the time, but it's another thing to use and abuse it in such a way that it then, gets to the level of bullying uh, to get their desired outcomes. And so, with that, the jawboning piece to me is very interesting because I know we're going to get into this just a little bit. I was listening to a interview that was centering President Obama, and that was one of the first things that he mentioned. He was asked specifically around, you know, what are the parameters? What are some things that presidents should not do, for example? And he would be qualified to talk about that.
Yep.
And he specifically said that it should it should not have to be codified, but clearly we have
Yeah.
people that have perfected the
Yeah.
art of jawboning, and so now we have to codify certain things because, frankly, certain decision makers, such as a president, has no problem obliterating coercive use of power. And
Right.
so, when you get to this point where jawboning is happening and then you have to rein things in that normally should not have to be codified,
Yeah.
like you gotta spell out things that really should be common sense to someone who is thinking about the people. But we know
Yeah.
that is not the case in this current White House. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the fact that we have to potentially codify into law that you can't use your speech, government speech, as a coercive form of power, to your point, Shauna, is just mind blowing, right? Should be a kind of baseline integrity. But anyway.
Oh, yeah, that baseline went to hell a long time ago, Lisa. But I do think that, you know, frankly, what just popped up in my mind is, let's think about all the things that would qualify in this category of jawboning. And I'm willing to go gully with this and take it all the way back to January 6th. But that's another podcast.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
We got a lot of examples, tons of examples. Yeah. All right. Well, now I know it's not just talking shit. It's
Yep. Yep.
it sounds like a strategy, an entire
I think
political
it is.
strategy.
I think it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I gotcha. I gotcha. All right. Well, I'm gonna figure out. I try to do this every week though. I try to figure out how I can use our word of the week every week in some way. Like our vocabulary word, like when we were kids in elementary.
Yeah. I think this will be easy. You just turn on the news, listen to someone speaking on behalf of the White House, and you've got it.
Ding, ding, ding. Exactly. There you go. There you go. All right. Well, let's dive into phase one. All right. So, Lisa, you know that we inundate each other with text and
We do.
links and podcasts and all the stories. And so, similar to many other phases that we've had on this podcast, I know it's something important when I hear from multiple people about the same thing,
Yeah.
especially multiple people that I know they have similar interests and also have similar values, right? So you sent me something on the Obama Presidential Center, and then I had three other ones, and then I got some pictures, and then I had a friend that went to the soft launch, and I'm like, oh, hold up. We got to talk about it now. We got to talk about it because obviously, before presidents leave office, they're already starting to think about what they want that legacy to look
Yeah.
like and be. But now seeing it fully from a concept to fruition is just going to be incredible. So let's talk about this a little bit. So the Obama Presidential Center, what we know about it is that for those that attended the soft launch, they cannot share any of their photos, videos,
Oh.
that stuff
Okay.
until a couple of days before the opening, which will be Juneteenth, June 19th, which
Oh, I love that. Love it.
that's another little
Yep.
rabbit trail we can talk about later. But so they can't release anything until June. It is a 19.3 acre campus in Chicago's Jackson Park, and it's incredible. So I knew that it was going to be a tower. It's a 225-foot tall tower, and it has 8 floors to it. It is a branch now of the Chicago Public Library, which, Lisa, I brought this up on the podcast before, where Chicago Public Library is the home and kind of the hub of book sanctuaries, which I thought was an incredible aside to this as
Yeah.
well. So it's an official Chicago Public Library branch. It has what they've called a home court, which is an athletic and recreation space with a gym. And that's 45,000 square feet of space that they've set aside. Public gardens, like an outdoor space, like a women's garden, a wetland walk, a playground. There is even a sledding hill, which is just perfection for
Yeah.
Chicago.
That's going to be great.
And so they're anticipating 700,000 annual visitors and, of course, hopefully creating thousands of jobs. And so, I'm really excited to see that it's now coming to fruition. It's a $850 million project that isn't meant to be a dusty old place in space that doesn't have any life in it. It's something that they started out with the process of making sure that this would be a community hub, if you will, for engaging residents from everywhere, but especially in Chicago.
Yeah.
And the access piece to this, Lisa, I'll tell you about the access to the museum, and then please, I want to hear what you think about it. But when I read, let me go check out the tickets and, so forth and so on. Illinois residents can visit for free on Tuesday. So, Tuesday attendance is going to be sky high. They did something very similar with the National African American History Museum here, the Smithsonian here in DC. And folks that are EBT and WIT card holders get free tickets. All they have to do is go through the Museums for All program, and they get free tickets regardless. And so with this is one of 15 presidential centers and or museums. And so, Lisa, I'm really interested in all the different ways this one is different from the others, including that it's fully digital when it comes to documentation and some other things. I'm seeing that it has so much life in it in comparison to some of the others. I've been to some of the other ones. I've definitely been to all the ones in Virginia, but I also went to FDR's in Hyde Park, New York. And yeah, I'm just very curious and interested and would love to just be there at the grand opening. But as with much of these types of places and spaces, it ain't gonna die down for a while. It might take a year and a half, 2 years for things to die down enough that folks can go in and fully experience all of it. So, anyway, what are your thoughts on the Obama Presidential Center?
I mean, as you were talking, the thing that struck me most was how community oriented it is, which is what you had said that too. But the fact that it's a Chicago Public Library branch, they have an athletic space, they have gardens, they are offering free days, right? And they're offering free entry to people who have lower income and are on these particular programs. And it just feels so different to what we're experiencing now, right? That the Obamas, because I'm sure Michelle had something to do with this, are so embedded in that Chicago community. It's right around the corner from where they married, and I think from where Michelle grew up. And it's their way of giving back to the community. And I just feel like that is definitely not going to be the purpose of the current president's library or museum. And I don't know the degree to which it's part of the others. I've only been to Bill Clinton's, and I can't really remember it. I just remember being in the gift shop and buying a talking Bill Clinton doll that was on sale because it made me laugh so hard. And yeah, so that is what strikes me, and it's actually so representative, I think, of President Barack Obama's identity as a president. And when I was watching that video, where he was recently interviewed by Stephen Colbert, because as you know, his late show or Tonight Show, I forget what it's called, is ending at the end of May, and Stephen Colbert has been a very loud opponent to rising fascism in the country. And so we had this interview with the president, and it was so cute. And I don't mean that like in a patronizing way. It just made me go, oh my God.
Yeah, I said the same thing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so different. It was just so different. The tone, the responses. Like, no, it wasn't self-aggrandizing. It was, like they were both kind of doing digs at each other, and it was, but in a loving way. It was just so different. And I just was like, I actually texted the video to some family members in the UK, and I was like, I wish this man was still president. And I think this library and how you've described it in all of its components speak to that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I used the word cute as well, Lisa, and I kept trying to think why. Like, it's not like I'm watching puppies here. I'm watching,
Right.
A living president talk about his experience and what he wishes for the world. But I I'm telling you, there's visceral reactions to 45 and 47.
Yeah.
And so when you watch something or a conversation like President Obama talking to anyone, every word he says feels light. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
literally could look in the camera and say, we have to go to war today. And it would still sound lighter coming from him than it
Yeah.
would from who we currently have. And so, with that, I think he took the role seriously. He did not take himself seriously. Um, he understood the weight of it. And there's so many things too about this presidential center that I'm glad now that he finally gets to address the blackety blackness of it all when it comes to
Right.
the
Right.
experience. Because in that Colbert interview too, that little snippet of the larger interview is that, this center is opening on June 19th. Hello, anybody looking at a freaking camera knows that, I mean, looking at a calendar will know that that means Juneteenth specifically. Um, and what he mentioned in that Colbert interview was, I want people to understand my legacy in context.
Yeah.
We can't, even if he wanted to, he can't talk about his presidency without talking about being the first.
Right.
The
Right.
first. And knowing that is one piece, acknowledging the weight of that, acknowledging people like my parents, my grandparents, my aunties, my uncles that thought that that day would never ever come. And now I have children that at one point knew nothing but a black president. You know,
Yeah.
that shifting isn't important to him to acknowledge. And I've listened to that one, but there was another one. I think it's been a couple of years now, but he did an interview with the Pivot, which is three retired NFL players, and he sat down and talked with them, and he addressed how, yeah, I know our community, as far as the Black community, wanted me to explicitly say, hey, we need to address this for Black folks. We need to address that for Black folks. Instead, he took the approach of, I'm addressing these major things that disproportionately affect Black folks so that folks that are not as direct and are not as militant and are not as knowledgeable or care about a history of disenfranchisement, it won't alienate them as he's trying to do the work. And so he addressed that
Yeah.
clearly. And so I appreciate now that he has some freedoms around being as blackety black as he wants to with his presidential center in context. We're not saying that, and I don't think he is saying that, oh, the only thing we can talk about is my Black identity. But what he is saying is that you can't talk about me without talking about my Black and
Yeah.
multiracial identity in context, especially when you got a blackity black wife, Black children, Black family, a African father, all these other things. Like,
Yeah.
that would be such a disconnect that would turn many communities off, Black or otherwise. And so I'm just glad he gets to address that freely without having to filter.
Yeah, and you know what you're making me think of? I think it just clicked while you were talking is that this
Mm-hmm.
museum, Presidential Library, Presidential Center, is not really about him, right? Um, whereas and I think what is so, the comparison is so clear is that we have a current president who makes everything about him, right? Names on things, building arches, building ballrooms. It's about him, how great he is. He can't do anything wrong. Me, 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 me. And that's not to say that
Yes.
President Obama doesn't have some of that, right? But this center it's going to have information about his presidency and the policy achievements like the Affordable Care Act, etc. But it's giving, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't. That's just not. We don't have that now. We don't have a leader that serves and gives. We have a leader that takes and centers on himself. And I think that is what
Mm-hmm.
is just very clear, that difference when I was watching that interview and then hearing you talk about the components of the center.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even when I would encourage y'all to go out to, I think it's either at obamafoundation.org or just obama.org. And you can go out and look at the campus and some of the drone footage of the campus. The building itself, everybody run out, get your phone and Google the word obelisk, and that's what it is. And we know an obelisk, it can be officially connected to some Greek architecture, but it is very specifically Egyptian as well. That's speaking something to me, right?
Yeah.
Then when you're looking at some of the other things that I saw, you're right. Everything is kind of looking at the stream of history and inviting people into it as community.
Yeah.
So, you know what? I guarantee you there's no other presidential center or library that has a freaking gym that's included where people can come and be there, in community, or a forum where you can host events. dining there specifically. Like, really? No, it's clearly meant to be a living space.
Right,
Not, oh, I'm going to
right.
come visit and bow down to 45, 47 and how wonderful he is. It's no, come and see what we built. And I think some of the walls, even in the videos that I looked at last week, have his slogans of "Yes, we can" on the
Yeah,
walls. I mean,
yeah.
it is very much community oriented, and so I'm excited to get out to see it because I've seen others, and you're right, most of them are come and see me. This one feels more like let's come be together, and that's a
Hmm.
different feeling entirely. But Lisa, shoot, they did that at the White House though.
Yeah, they did.
They did that at the White House. I mean, they work things out. How many people? Michelle is like, I don't even care if we got to put up twice as many trees. We want more trees up so that we have an excuse to invite more people to come to the White House
Yeah,
to
yeah.
see them, decorate them, and enjoy our house.
Hmm.
That one ain't gonna do it. Let's just obliterate the rose garden, and we know who
Well,
the priority was.
yeah, and I think you're touching on something
Incredible.
here that's kind of I guess separate a little bit from our original point of this
Mm-hmm.
discussion, but it's the people's house, right? And
There
so
you
it's
go.
it's it's not owned by the president who is occupying it. And
Mm-hmm.
that is been an understood component for pretty much every president prior to the one we have. And the one we have is just like knocking down the East Wing building, this ballroom that's like three
Mm-hmm.
times as high, two times as high, or much bigger than the actual kind of iconic White House building. And he's
Mm-hmm.
treating it as though it's his.
There you
And
go.
it isn't just the Obamas that were more oriented towards it being belonging to the people. I do think that's true of
Mm-hmm.
all of the prior presidents to varying degrees. This one, it's just not at
Mm-hmm.
all, right? And so
Yeah, yeah.
that will play forward in his library, I imagine, that will be all about making money
Mm-hmm.
for him.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, of course, of course. Well, and even the words, remember that the building literally speaks to we as America. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the full quote on the side of the building, it starts out with "You are America," and it's
Mm-hmm.
speaking from one of his speeches in particular during the what was it, the 50th anniversary of Selma, I think, where he was specifically talking about "You are America, we the people, we shall overcome. Yes, we can." Some of that phrasing, and so it's like even the building itself screams, "This is us. We're in this together. This is the potential of the American people." And so,
Yeah.
yeah, the when you're going from such drastic self-centeredness to selflessness,
Yeah.
it does feel almost like a little bit of whiplash there when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to the approaches. But I'm excited. I would love to just be there during the opening, even though Lord knows I cannot because June is already obliterated at this point. But I'm going to be watching as we see all the people. And I know I have a lot of Chicago
Mm-hmm.
friends that are making it their business to be there during that month. But I'm excited to see everything and still continue to hold that dichotomy between what this is and what the others have not been. And frankly, can't be because they don't hold the type of role in history that President Obama
Right.
does.
Right.
It is a very small club of presidents, obviously, but it's a one person dot of a club of an individual that has been president that was non-white.
Yeah. And the other thing I just thought of is,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been to Jimmy Carter's presidential center. Have you? It's in
Yeah.
Atlanta.
No, I haven't. I
And
haven't. It's in
I
Georgia.
wouldn't
Yep.
be surprised if he's another president that has his center oriented around the community, right? I mean, people make fun of Jimmy
Mm.
Carter, but he gave, his like rural peanut farmer days or whatever, and he went back to his peanut
Yeah.
farm, right? He gave so much to the American people and then continued into his 90s doing Habitat for Humanity and such. So he has the same kind of community orientation, I think, as President Obama. So I would be curious to look at his place and see how it compares, as a white
Mm,
man, in a long
good
line of white
question.
men, right? But in terms of the
Hmm.
way that he has framed his legacy, because I think that that's an interesting thing. How do you frame your legacy?
Yeah, and I'm also, well, to bring that up too, because I know one of the things that I do recall, even though I haven't been, was that, we all know how important Rosalind was to his
Mm-hmm.
entire life.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when you see anything about his legacy, you'll either see them together or like on a website, you'll see them side by side. Like it's never a situation where if he has control of it, it's never a situation where he's outshining her. And so I'm like, oh, let's see what's going on with Michelle as well, because
Yeah.
Michelle is, you
Yep.
know, central to the presidency, but also central to Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we shall see. I mean, the fact that you got a women's garden should tell you something, okay? It
Oh
should
yeah.
tell you something.
Yeah.
So,
Hand and footprints all over that.
hello, exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. So, all right, well, let's dive into phase two.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a continuation from last week. If you recall, we talked about the Voting Rights Act and the SCOTUS decision that basically struck it down, essentially. So there was an update that what has been happening as predicted since then is a number of southern states are now redistricting. And part of the thing I wanted, before I ask you this question, so the case was Louisiana versus Calais, and usually when the Supreme Court issues an opinion, there's about 4 to 5 weeks before it becomes final. And so Louisiana petitioned the court so that they could speed up that process, which would enable them to redistrict quicker. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, sure. Right? So that in and of itself shows the cards in terms of where the conservative justice is, or at least the Chief Justice is in terms of this. And so I think we'd mentioned last time that Louisiana had already started early voting, and there were several thousand people that had already voted in the primary that are now, dead on arrival, those votes, right? So they're
Mm-hmm.
redistricting and they delayed the primary, and now they're going to do it again. But Tennessee just passed a redistricted map, so a gerrymandered map. And so for those who don't know, like Tennessee is kind of like a rectangle. It's like longer and thinner. And in the bottom left-hand corner is Memphis. And Memphis is a majority African-American city. And historically, the city of Memphis, because there's so many people in it, was its own district, congressional district. And it was that way because of the Voting Rights Act, right? To protect the voting power of African American, Black Americans in Memphis. So, what the Tennessee legislature did is they basically cut Memphis into three. So now there are three kind of long, winding, bizarrely shaped districts that each have a little bit of Memphis in it. And the rest of the district is likely to vote Republican. So, essentially, because there's a correlation between race and political affiliation and political party, that district had a Democratic congressional representative. So that person is now they're going to lose their seat. And so Tennessee will be electing all Republican Congress people because of the way they've just essentially gerrymandered this district. And it is so blatant the racism in this move, but what is being articulated both by the Supreme Court and by legislators in these southern states is that it is unconstitutional to draw districts based on race. We need colorblind districting. So what I want to talk to you about, Shauna, is colorblindness, because I think for a lot of people, if you don't talk about it at depth, colorblindness seems right. We should not be making judgments, hiring, districting based on race, right? Like, to be equal, race should not be a factor. So colorblindness I think intrinsically, in a gut way, feels right to a lot of people. But what I want to kind of illuminate here through our conversation is that it's actually not okay and makes things more unequal and harms people of color and Black Americans in particular when we think about the history of this country.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think about the right, like, color blindness policy has risen and fallen over time, right? We are
Mm-hmm.
in a
Mm-hmm.
kind of ascendant moment for colorblind policy, which is all part of this whole DEI, affirmative action,
Mm-hmm.
removing that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say to a person that is earnestly believing that colorblindness is a good thing because I shouldn't be judging people based on their racial identity?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, so many things. Oh my gosh, we could talk all day about color blindness, racial color blindness. Uh, the first thing that I would say is that there are at least two different groups. There's a
Mm-hmm.
group of folks that utilize color blindness as a weapon to avoid actually acknowledging and talking about race.
Yes.
There's another group of folks that would like to use color blindness sincerely to create fairness and keep fairness
Mm-hmm.
moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge with both of those groups, whether nefarious or well intentioned, is that, again, it ignores context. It's very much like what President Obama said before. It's like, you got to put it in context, right? And it feels as if avoiding the acknowledgement and the conversation around race absolves the issues from happening
Right, right.
and absolves us from having to course correct decades and decades and decades of history. So to me, it's very much it's an escape. It's the easy route. It's the
Yeah,
shortcut
yeah.
to thinking that we're doing the right thing, right? Now, here's the rub. We got history going on here. I mean, if we go all the way back, we can go back to, you know, Plessy versus
Mm-hmm.
Ferguson, you know, with separate but equal stuff. And then we come all the way up to where were we, 2023 at that time with the admissions case with Harvard,
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
way up to that case, talking about the same freaking thing, Lisa, around racial color blindness.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, there is, so Lisa, we hear this more often than not. And you, as someone who was not born and raised here, will hear this in a more sensitive way than a white person would hear it that was born here. Is that we don't talk about race because a lot of folks think that the conversations around race are so negative that let's ignore it altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be clear, there's no positive way to talk about slavery. There's no
Right,
positive
right.
way to talk about being fucking kidnapped from an entire continent and brought here.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no, so the escape of, oh, that's just so negative. Well, there are some things, some conversations, some concepts that will never have a positive slant to them, which then gives us yet another scapegoat for not talking about it if we say it's so negative, right? And so with that, it is very escapist to me. It's very, and not only is it very escapist, the privilege of even fucking saying that I don't want to talk about race through color blindness is one that Black and brown people do not have.
Right.
We don't have the privilege or the luxury to move in a world or not think about how race applies to any and everything, even if unintentioned. And so that whole color blindness thing, it's erasure in such a way that will never work. Because how do you, looking at me in this Zoom camera right now, Lisa, you cannot, unless you are physically unable to visually see me, there's no way that you
Right.
cannot see that I am a Black person. And that connects to experiences. Now, Lisa, you know, through a lot of our DI trainings and so forth and so on, there's always that sticking point when we start talking about the identity wheel and specifically about race on certain things. There's this cadre of folks that, oh, let me clutch my pearls because I feel uncomfortable labeling people
Mm-hmm.
because we know that labeling comes with certain connotations. Oh, well, she's blonde, so she must not be smart, or or he's this, or
Mm-hmm.
when labeling and being descriptive are two different things. Acknowledging a history and how that affects all of us in our current world is very privileged, the easy way out, and it allows you to skip a whole lot of steps that this country should not skip. But we
Yeah.
do all the time,
Yeah. I
all
mean,
the
I think
time.
colorblindness is a pervasive issue, probably globally, right? But and
Mm, mm,
when I first came to the United States, I definitely had that attitude. I think, like, I believed in equal rights, and I felt like the civil rights movement was important in the United States, right? And and again, like, I went to Colorado State University, which is in Fort Collins, and in just north of there in Laramie, Wyoming, Matthew Shepard was murdered. You all might remember that. So that was recent-ish, and I had a similar kind of like sexual orientation agnostic, like, doesn't matter what sexual orientation you are, it doesn't matter who you love or who you marry, right? Like, humans, we should treat everyone as humans. So that same kind of colorblindness ideology like stretched across all of these marginalized identities to me. And then as I started to understand that, well, if a whole system of policies and practices and institutions have kept a group from advancing, then they're not on this in the 2000s when I came here, they're not in the same place, right? So you have to have kind of reparative, if that's the right word, like actions to create the equality. You can't just get equality. But I don't know how my experience compares to white people who grew up in this country, right? Because I I just seems so, I feel like it seems so obvious to me now how problematic colorblindness is, but I wasn't always in that place.
mm, mm-hmm.
And I also think about this a lot, Shauna, that when I studied the US politics in the United Kingdom, and we learned about the civil rights movement and
Mm-hmm.
slavery, and things like that to the extent that was possible, in a short term. But I didn't get it until I came here and started to really kind of think about and understand the degree to which racism is so embedded structurally and
Oh God,
systemically.
yes,
It
yes,
was
yes, yes,
just
yes.
this, and I'm still learning, right? And so there is that distancing that happens through colorblindness, right? Like you were saying, and I think that's where I was when I first kind of came to this country. Like, that happened in the past. Now we treat everyone equally. So I shouldn't even notice that Shauna has a different color skin from me because that in and of itself is wrong. Rather than thinking, well, if I don't acknowledge Shauna's racial identity, then I'm just erasing all of her experience in the world, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And here's what I don't like about color blindness when it comes to kind of those baked in systems of our everyday living is
Mm-hmm.
that color blindness is such a great way to absolve yourself, whether it's individually, community, organization, etc., absolving you from understanding it,
Mm-hmm.
feeling it,
Mm-hmm.
or correcting it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's not okay. Yes, I do want you to see that I am African American. I do want you to see that these are African American things. But Lisa, think about the degrees, plural, to which we deal with color blindness, racial color blindness in this country. We still have people in this country that can't even say the word
Yeah.
without whispering it.
Yeah.
And so, what makes you think that you and I can walk into an organization and start talking about anti racism in a scholarly or practical way when they literally cannot say the word, term, phrase, definition?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because, again, I do think that's extremely embedded as far as socialization.
Yeah.
Lisa, help me to understand, Lisa, how I, as a African American woman from an African American household who lived in not only Virginia, but Southern Virginia in the
Mm-hmm.
seat of the frickin' Civil War. And I graduated from high school, public high school, not knowing that civil, or not, I didn't know, but not being told directly that the Civil War was about frickin' slavery.
Yeah.
If that's not an example of colorblindness, I don't know what is. But again, it's the let's skip some steps. Let's not
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge how embedded this is.
Yeah.
Let's notice that even to this day, my family, friends, and loved ones from home live in a certain neighborhood, and others live in another neighborhood because of their lack of melanin in their skin, and tell me that that's a choice.
Yeah.
It wasn't their choice.
Right. Yeah.
We're skipping a lot of steps, Lisa. And it's because, Lisa, if I had a magic wand and could get rid of anything, it would not necessarily be racism. It would be the root of it, which is white comfort. It is more comfortable to talk about being fair and colorblindness than it is talking about why we need corrective measures.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like saying, oh, well, if we just eat right and live healthy, everything will be all right. But you have cancer. That's not how it freaking works.
Right.
You got to have a diagnosis. You got to have a prognosis. And we don't want to do that as a country because it makes us uncomfortable to look at ourselves.
Oh, 100%. Yes. So, I mean, okay. So there was this funny, it's not funny. It's funny illustrative of the issue
Yes,
in
yes.
the Tennessee, if we can even call it a debate, because I'm not really sure it counts for that, related to this redistricting that split Memphis. A Democratic legislator in the state legislator who was opposed to this. I think he's an African American man. I only heard it. I didn't see the video. He asked the Speaker of the House, who is white, so Memphis is a predominantly black city, is it not? And the Speaker of the House was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know the racial makeup of
Use
Memphis.
a damn lie. If your lips are moving, you're freaking lying. But
Which
continue.
is
Go
just
ahead. Not you, him.
color blindness to
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
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 like
yeah.
this, like, of course you know the racial makeup of Memphis, right? But like he couldn't say it, and he wanted to appear like that's not part of this. We're just breaking this up because Memphis votes Democratic. It's got nothing to do with racial identity. I am not a racist. I am colorblind. He didn't say all of that, but it was just such a funny clip. And then Adam Serwer, who's an Atlantic writer who I really like, he does a lot of work around race and culture. He wrote a piece on the Supreme Court decision, Louisiana versus Calais, and he made this comment that was for John Roberts, who's the Chief Justice. Government infringement on states' rights as a means to prevent or ameliorate racism and the impacts of that is more problematic than racism itself. That is kind of how
That's
he
right.
conceives of it, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he was also a justice, and I forget the opinion where he said this, but he said, the only way to end racial discrimination is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. And again, we've talked about that particular statement on this podcast before. And again, I think on the surface, for not bad actors, for good faith people, I understand why that makes sense. But to President Obama's point, to your point, it is ahistorical and acontextual, right? And it's
Absolutely.
an easy way that skips a ton of layers.
Absolutely. It skips right over. And so, what it ends up doing actually, and some of the research out there talks about this specifically around how doubling down on not talking about race actually leaves Black and brown folks worse off. They feel even more alienated. They feel even more overlooked. They feel
Yeah.
even more marginalized. And so, isn't that very paternalistic though? Not talking about race is better for y'all Black and brown folks.
Oh, totally. Yeah. We know better. Yeah.
Get out of here. And so, with that, I think, and this is, I'm not connecting the conversation right now to other things, like specifically what we formerly knew as affirmative action and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just simply saying, even if we look at a interpersonal level of things, if if I met you and got to know you and did not acknowledge any area of your identity that you want me to acknowledge, that to me, Lisa, I am now a fan, and I'm not trying to oversimplify it all. I want to acknowledge how the impact shows up. That to me would be considered yet another form of violence,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm saying I don't care who you are. I care who I want you to be. I care what I feel comfortable acknowledging.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's important to me. You're like, wait a minute, you don't get to slice me up and decide what's important and what's not. But we do it to black and brown folks every day,
All the time. Yeah. White people do
and
it too.
women. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's a huge issue. And so I just wanted to talk about it. I have, us talk about it
Yeah.
because I think it's an easy out. And I understand the impetus for why white people, especially, fall for it. And I think
Oh,
if
yeah.
you give it even 10 minutes of thought, it makes sense why colorblindness in 2026 does not solve persistent systemic racial discrimination and exclusion in this country, right?
No, it doesn't solve it. It actually, it's kind of like I was listening to this. It was a number of different celebrities and so forth where they were being interviewed, and they were wrong and or offensive about something, and even when confronted, they just kept doubling down on it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what color blindness feels like. Is
Yeah.
we want you to name the history. We want you to name who we are, and your continued resistance to it, doubling down on it, even if you're well intentioned, is still harmful to me and the groups and the systems that directly affect the groups that I
Mm-hmm.
belong to.
Yeah.
Y'all
Yeah.
think you're doing us a favor by not talking about it, and actually you're
Yeah.
just killing
And you're
us
not.
slowly.
Yeah. And it is socialized and it is about the consolidation of power in white, mostly men's hands. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping that we're speaking to the person who doesn't necessarily hasn't thought much about it, might have kind of a gut feeling that it's okay,
Yeah,
to just encourage you to think more deeply about it because it's a form of erasure and it's being used to roll back
erasure.
all of the civil rights legislation that was enacted specifically in a race
Mm-hmm.
conscious way.
That's right. That's exactly right. And what I'll do, Lisa, there was an article that I pulled. This was years ago that I specifically pulled about color blindness in different settings. We primarily talked about it here in interpersonal exchanges, and then
Mm-hmm.
also in some systems. But you got it everywhere. You got, the interpersonal stuff. You got the organizational stuff. Obviously, the educational stuff that got obliterated through, affirmative action being wiped out
Yeah.
legally. And then the article also provides some alternatives when it comes to folks comfort, discomfort, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
talking about color and race. So
Oh,
I'll link
great.
the
Yeah,
article to folks
great.
so they can think about it more deeply. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, it feels so good talking about blackity blackness freely, in
Mm-hmm.
ways that are not meant to be vilifying.
Right.
Um, but at the same time, wasn't that the original intent anyway, was to erase certain
Yeah.
groups?
Yeah. Yep.
That still continues. All right.
It does.
Oh, all right. Well, this was a good one, y'all. This is a wrap on this week, but please don't hesitate to go take a look at all of our other podcasts. We are up there. I mean, we are at what, two 240 something, 241, 242 at this point. So please don't forget to go and check out our archives here. All right. You can certainly reach us on all of our social media platforms, our your favorite podcast app, at Unfazed Unedited, or just email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com if you have some words, some thoughts, some ideas that you would like us to cover on a future episode. So if you like this week's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends, coworkers, or others in this phase of your life. So until next week.
See you next week.